Once upon a time, there was an armadillo named Harold. Harold wanted to be a painter, but he had no paint. He had no money to go buy paint, so he decided to start with just a little sketch in the sand. He wanted to sketch his friend Myrna, who was a cow. He thought she was beautiful and good. So early one morning, as the sun was rising, he asked his friend Myrna to pose for him. But the image that he created didn't really look like Myrna. Really. He looked up at Myrna. She was standing there a few feet away, and she was chewing on something and wondering what it was she was chewing on and why. And every once in a while, she'd be struck with these fleeting moments of panic that she might accidentally step on her friend Harold, who was making her feel so special, asking her to pose for a portrait. Harold looked at Myrna. He looked back at his portrait, and, well, you know, she's different down there, and her eyes are a little bit broader in her nose, and he started making corrections, but then he ended up just making a mess. So with a swish of his tail, swish, he erased it and started anew. And this time, he got those areas right, but the areas that he had gotten just right the first time, they're all messed up in this one. So swish, he cleared his canvas again and started over again, and no, and he swished again and started over, and no, swish, and no, swish, and start over, and again, and again, and again, over and over, and it got worse and worse. Finally, as if by sheer luck, he somehow managed to cobble together something that looked, well, kind of like her. It was just something that he could live with, and he turned to get her attention, and this big gust of wind came along and blew it all away, erased it all. He sighed, and he thought to himself, I'm going to try this one more time. And if it doesn't work, maybe I'll just give up trying to be an artist, go into professional sports. I can't be just another armadillo. He took a deep breath and he looked up at Myrna. She was chewing something, and off in her own little world, oh, to be a cow! He looked back at his canvas. He liked the thought of the ground as his canvas, the whole world as his canvas. Made him feel powerful. But it was only power if he could rein in his artistic rage, produce something worthwhile. He took a deep breath and he began. And the first stroke was the curve of her brow, the arch of her brow, and it was just right. And then the curve of her jowl, and that was perfect too, it was just right, yes! And with a little more confidence, he drew the majestic slope of her snout, and it was perfect! Meanwhile, on the other side of the field, Luther the bull was grazing, and this deer fly named Alessandro, on a dare from some of his friends, landed smack dab on the bull's nose and bit him right between the nose ring. Chomp! The bull, Luther, he jerked his head up as this black speck went buzzing off, shouting, I'm invincible! But the first thing Luther saw when he jerked his head up, standing at the opposite end of the field, standing with such grace, such poise, Myrna, and his sudden awareness of her beauty, well, it seized his soul, and he needed her immediately. He had to consume her. He had to have her. He had to be one with her. He had to be her, as much as a studly bull could be a cow. His spirit was ensnared, and only she could free him. Joy was gushing out of Harold's heart. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. He knew why he was alive, why he was on this planet. It was to paint! Or, you know, scrawl in the sand. But this portrait of Myrna, it was really coming together. It was what he saw in his mind's eye. He didn't need to look up at her anymore. He didn't want to look up at her anymore. She couldn't possibly be this ravishing in real life. He was touching the sand lightly as shades of her grace appeared to him. Myrna sensed Luther at about 15 paces, like in this immense oncoming cloud of leather and steam. She spun and froze him in his tracks. Momentarily. He sauntered up to her, and oh, he had to have her, and Myrna had just enough time to reconcile the fact that her portrait would probably not be completed at this sitting, or standing. She was just reconciling herself to this as Luther charged and landed, and Myrna staggered forward, and oh no, she did it, she stepped on him. She squashed Harold. Poor little fella was gone, and a little while later, Myrna remembered squashing her friend, and she was sorry, but he really was out of his mind, you know. I mean, an artist armadillo, come on. Should have worried less about art and more about getting squashed. Later that morning, Farmer Joe came out, to round up the herd. It was time for everyone to get slaughtered. And he found Harold. What was left of Harold, like a still life, laying there, claw outstretched, putting the finishing touch on his masterpiece. The gleam in Myrna's eye. And Farmer Joe looked down and he said, "I'll be corn dog damned." And he ran out to the local pet superstore and bought this 250-gallon aquarium, saltwater, took it home, turned it upside down to cover the whole scene in glass, took a digital photo of it, which circulated through the whole globe by lunchtime. Everyone on the planet had seen it, and biologists and art historians all descended on this field that afternoon to see for themselves this famous armadillo sketch artist, or what was left of him. And well, it turned into kind of like a party. It was like a hoedown. They cooked Myrna and a couple of her friends, and they drank tea and whiskey and had a big old time till late in the day. And then everyone went home. And that was pretty much that. Except just down the road, there was another armadillo. And he was looking at a tree in the setting sun. He looked at that tree, and he looked at the ground, and he looked back at the tree. Thanks for coming tonight, y'all. Enjoy the show. There's no Q&A afterwards, so feel free to not stick around. But thanks for coming.